We're going to talk about one of the true giants and one of the most creative spirits in the history of jazz. And I really can't say history, because when you say history, you're talking about something in the past. And this guy, at 90 years of age, is still practicing every day 2 or 3 hours and performing. His name, at birth, was Walter Theodore Rollins. We know him as Sonny Rollins. His friends knew him as Nuke because he had an uncanny resemblance to a Dodger baseball player named Newsom. So they just shortened it to Nuke. But we know him as Sonny, and we'll go with that, okay? Born in 1930 in New York, in Harlem. He grew up in Central Harlem and in Sugar Hill. Sugar Hill, yeah. That's a part of Harlem where the people in the middle class that had a little money and could eat good and dress good and had some opportunity, they lived there. It was called Sugar Hill. A lot of artists and politicians and civic leaders and whatnot came from that Sugar Hill area. Matter of fact, I went to a club there a few years ago that Winter Marsalis owned called the Sugar Hill Bistro. It's still happening on Sugar Hill. Well, Sonny was born there in 1930. He is from a Caribbean family, West Indies. And you're going to find that in his career, he never forgot where he came from. We'll talk about that in a while. You see, his life started like all fairly privileged young African-American kids in Sugar Hill, junior high and high school. You had to graduate. You couldn't just drop out and go somewhere. Those Caribbean families wouldn't stand for that. You got to get your education, boy. But Sonny started playing instruments. First, the piano. That may explain why he was such a great improviser, had such great ears, and also a great composer. He moved from the piano to the alto saxophone for a few years. And somewhere around 16, he switched to the tenor saxophone, and that is where he stayed. And that became his primary instrument from 16 on. In high school, he hung out with some friends like Kenny Drew. Yeah, that's right, I said Kenny Drew was his friend from high school. And he and a bunch of other guys that became great jazz luminaries had a band in high school, and that is how jazz and performing started for him. He seemed to always be in the right place at the right time, and Sugar Hill was always the right place. All the musicians came through there. You may remember this legendary photo that was taken somewhere around 1959, a great day in Harlem, where all of these jazz musicians and a few kids from the neighborhood were photographed. Sonny is in that photograph. He was always on the scene. He soon, although a little bit younger than the beboppers, he would have been, 15 and 16 when Miles Davis started playing with Bird, which means he had just switched to tenor saxophone. So he was he was one of the young guys. You would call him one of the young lions. But he learned very, very quickly. And he was a prolific practicer. And did not mind woodshedding, and that led him to be in ensembles with the greatest very, very early. Everyone from Thelonious Monk to Max Roach, his favorite drummer, Miles Davis. He was in Clifford Brown's band. And he even made one recording while playing with Miles Davis that included John Coltrane. And it's the only recording of Train and Nuke together. Now, very early on one of the first albums he recorded with Miles, he premiered his compositions, Doxy, Pent up house, not penthouse, pent up house, probably referring to what it was like being raised in a strict Caribbean family. Allegren, which people need to understand, is Nigeria spelled backwards. He always had this sense of Pan-Africanism, that he was connected to black folks from all around the world, and that probably also was informed by his Caribbean roots. He continued to record with the best and the brightest of the day. Soon he is starting to lead his own groups and do his own recordings. And many, many innovations in jazz. He is considered by many to be the greatest improviser of all time. That's high praise, the greatest improviser of all time. On one of the pieces he composed a little bit later in his life, St. Thomas, which was very much a Caribbean piece, kind of a calypso thing. It was based on a song that his mother sang to him as a child. In his improvisation, he used a rhythmic pattern, not a melodic pattern, a rhythmic pattern, and he took that rhythm and displaced it within time, within the beat, within the measure, many different ways. And then also with different pitches to create this continuously expanding improvisation, but also gave that long, long solo some cohesiveness by always returning to that central rhythmic factor. This was groundbreaking because almost everyone else was dealing with modality or arpeggios or scales or melodic motifs or whatever, and Sonny was very much in the rhythm. And that too was probably informed by his Caribbean background. It's all about rhythm, it's all about rhythm, and it's also all about the dance. Which brings us to another little tidbit about Sonny Rollins. Even though he was a saxophone player, very early, he was a dancer. And he had a little dance duet with his sister, and he thought he would be a dancer. And he had an accident, messed up one of his ankles, and that ended his dancing career. And since you don't need your ankles to play the saxophone, he put all of his energy into that saxophone. I'm happy he had that accident and messed up that ankle, because without that, we may have missed one of the most prolific performers and composers of all time. In terms, he liked to record live, and the word is he has an archive of about 200 live concerts, and so far he's released only 4 of those recordings. So there's a whole lot more Sonny Rollins yet to come, a whole lot more Sonny Rollins. He was one of the first people to introduce the jazz group without a piano. Yeah, he recorded with just bass and drums. And this style of playing was called strolling. We do know that in our discussion of Jerry Mulligan and Chet Baker on the West Coast and their smooth, not that, cool jazz style, they had a pianoless group, although Mulligan would occasionally play piano, and so would Chet Baker. With Rollins, there was no piano. It was drums and bass and Sonny. And of course, he was the kind of improviser that he could make it happen. This is another great trend that he set and a great innovation he set for the jazz to come. And many have emulated it, including Branford Marsalis and Josh Redman and Joe Lovano, who are three of the great titans on the tenor saxophone today. They all pay homage to the great Sonny Rollins by emulating his style. Many successful recordings with the best and the brightest. His style was pulled from Don Byers and Bean and Prez, all the standard tenor saxophone players of the day. And then he discovered Bird, and that kind of took him in a different direction. His sound was big like Coleman Hawkins, but his improvisational lines were smooth and like Prez. So he kind of absorbed everything around him and then combined it into a unique style that was all his own. That's what you call genius. Absorption and then synthesis. That's the mark of a genius, a real deep, creative thinker. Unfortunately, as our discussion of Mingus indicated, one of the songs Mingus wrote was called Gunslinging Bird, and unfortunately, Sonny Rollins was one of those people who was affected by Bird's dark side. Yes, right. He started using heroin and became a junkie. Yeah, he did. At 20, he went to jail in Rikers for 10 months for armed robbery. He did get out, and while on probation, he was arrested a second time for substance abuse, primarily heroin, and sent off, I think, to Lexington, which was the only prison we had that dealt with addiction, the only one at that time. And that was sad, but that's where he went. And he volunteered for a brand new technique in working with dependency called methadone treatment. He kicked the habit. Yes, he did. But he would worry that if he kicked the habit, he would not be as effective of a player or as creative. You see, that whole bird thing, that whole gunslinging bird thing got deep into his head. But he did not go back to the drugs. He did get the heck out of New York, however, and moved to Chicago, where he hung out. Actually, he lived with Booker Little for a while and paid his dues there, playing with the local cats and making some outstanding recordings during this period. Later, he moves back to New York, and in the 50s, 56, 57, his career is going just great. Grammy nominations, you know, great acceptance for all of his recordings, you name it. And all of a sudden in 1959, he disappears. He disappears. This was his first, shall we say, sabbatical from touring and performing and recording and all that. It's the bridge period. He was reputed to practice every night on the Brooklyn Bridge all night long for 2 years. He reemerged in 1961, and after practicing like that for 2 years, at the peak of his career, the recordings that followed were even more astonishing. It is at this point that he is called the saxophone colossus. There's no one that can rival him. John Coltrane is just starting to spread his wings. Sonny is the man. Nuke is the man. He continued this prolific outpouring of music, both in terms of compositions and recording, live concerts, touring, you named it. He continued to record with full groups, quintets, quartets, and with the trio devoid of piano. International travel, awards start pouring in. Everything is going great. And then 10 years later, 1969, he takes another sabbatical. This time, he goes to India and Mumbai and Africa and to study yoga and meditation and to come to grips with centering himself and expanding his world view and really his place in the universe, making peace with his humanity. He was always committed to the struggle of black folks in this country. Arrogant, which is Nigeria spelled backwards, was not the only indication of that. He once lamented that how horrible it was that the life of people of African descent is one that is completely of humanities, whether it is the visual arts or music or dance, drama, literature, whatever. That is what black people are. We are humanities. And yet, in this, our forcibly adopted country, we are brutalized, we are penalized, and sometimes we lose our very life. Sonny was outspoken and continues to be outspoken in that regard. However, the music continues. I actually had a chance to see him at the Clearwater Jazz Holiday. I'm informed that would have been somewhere around 1998. And he was moving with the trends a little bit, using electric bass and etc. But it was still Sonny, man, with these long solos, improvising, never repeating anything, just continuing an outpouring of creativity in the moment. Like no one has been able to duplicate. Many have tried, but there's only one Sonny Rollins, and no one could do it better. I remember an interview just a few years ago, and I think he was like 85 or so, and someone was asking him about his life, his daily routine, and he said, well, I wake up and I get myself prepared, for my day, and then I practice for 2 or 3 hours every day. And the guy said, what? You're Sonny Rollins, you've been doing this for what now, 7 decades? You have been at this for almost 7 decades. Why are you practicing like this every day? He says 2 reasons. Number 1, I want to make sure that I communicate clearly and without fault. So I've got to have control of my instrument. Number 2, there are a lot of young cats out here playing a whole lot of saxophone. And I don't want any of them running up on me thinking they can get some of this. because I'm still the man. And I thought, yeah, that's the way you got to do it. If you're going to do it full blast to the very end. Sonny is 90 years old, and he is still pushing. If you go to his webpage, there's a video where you can see him speak to you about his life, his philosophy, his music, his journey in his own voice. And to see this 90-year-old man speak with passion and energy of a 21-year-old, it just takes your breath away. Because once again, this man has been on this journey for 7 decades and is still on the journey. He has released over 60 albums, has gotten Lifetime Achievement Award from the Grammys, many Grammys for his performances, many nominations, honorary doctorates, congressional decrees, not just in the United States, but all around the world. He's a master, and he is a national treasure. And he is still with us. You know, not only is he creative, inspirational, dedicated to his art form, he is also strong, built with a fortitude, internal fortitude that few human beings are gifted with. Once again, the way to really learn about Sonny Rollins is just to listen to him play. In his later years, when he was doing television performances and things like that, he once showed up on The Tonight Show for a guest appearance with no band. That's right. No drummer, no bass, just him and his saxophone. And you know what? When he started playing, all you could do was drop your jaw and go, my God. And when he finished, you didn't miss a piano because he was playing all the harmony. You didn't miss a drummer because he always did play all the rhythms. As a matter of fact, sometimes when there were solos with the drummer or the bass player, he would serve as a rhythm section and play a rhythmic accompaniment on the saxophone. He could stand alone with his saxophone and give you all the music you could stand. That is the mark of an exceptionally gifted and dedicated artist. So please, as soon as you finish with this little video, with my few little words about this giant, go listen to some Sonny Rollins and let him communicate from his soul to your soul as only he can do, with the breath of life running through his Mark 6 or his Busher, whichever horn he decides to bring to the gig on that day, and be baptized in the spirit of creativity that can only be found in jazz improvisation. Walter Theodore Rollins, thank you for visiting us in this plane of existence and staying with us through 7 decades and continuing to bless us royally with that wonderful sound and that wonderful spirit. Thank you for listening.